Relatives are also there, the doctors are also there, and all efforts are being made to give them best of the treatment and to treat these patients who are in critical condition. Here there is yet another ward. This is also, all of the beds are fully occupied. There is a queue in waiting. Pressure is mounting.
As cases continue to go up, the healthcare system is slowly crumbling, slowly getting overwhelmed. Our hospitals are clearly unprepared and have been caught completely off guard once again by this second COVID wave. With Abhishek Mishra in Lucknow and Pankaj Khelkar in Pune, Bureau Report, India Today.
Six of Canada's provinces are leading the way. Alberta has the most active cases per capita now at 323. Ontario isn't far behind with 223. And more than 4,400 new cases were reported in Ontario today, adding to the already enormous strain on hospitals. Record numbers of COVID patients need intensive care. Hospitals in the Greater Toronto Area have been told to close their pediatric units to free up space and staff. Elective and non-urgent surgeries are being postponed. And that may not be enough. The situation in Ontario hospitals has never been more dire. Mike Drolet has our top story tonight.
For months, Ontarians have been warned a third wave of COVID-19 could be the worst one yet. And there's no denying the rise in ICU cases. Over two-thirds of the over 600 patients in hospital are on ventilators, leading to the difficult decision to cancel all elective surgeries. That means only emergency surgeries for things like heart attacks or trauma will continue. Joint replacements, cataracts, even cancer surgeries have been put off until the COVID cases decrease, leaving patients with chronic pain at home waiting.
A lot of people swarming into the hospital. The doctors are running up and down, and many people flooding into the hospital.
According to the province, it's another day with more than 500 patients with COVID-19 in intensive care in Ontario. Here at Humber River Hospital, the ICU is full. So with all the necessary precautions, we went inside to meet with one of the doctors and his team to witness the stress that they're dealing with in this third wave of the pandemic. This is what's in store for Dr. Jamie Spiegelman as the 11-year ICU doc starts his day at Humber River Hospital.
Yeah, so I'm just reviewing my list. On my side, I have 20 patients.
And then this, another need to intubate a patient desperately in need of air.
Yeah, he's very borderline. A lot of fluffy infiltrates here, both sides, so that's what COVID does.
Now, the number of patients being treated for COVID in hospitals across the UK is above 30,000, and more than 1,000 deaths have been reported for the latest 24-hour period. That's the highest since last April. The London area is at the centre of the crisis as we speak, and our medical editor Fergus Walsh has been allowed to film inside the intensive care unit.
Intensive care is under pressure like never before.
After Christmas, it just sort of hit me. I've seen a couple of people within the short time that I spent in a hospital, they didn't make it.
From a relentless rise in COVID admissions.
How long can you keep going like this?
At this pace, I think we've got about a week.
Staff fear burnout.
I'm here. Okay? The nurses are broken. The physical and mental load is huge.
This should be an operating theatre, but there's no surgery here. Instead, it's been converted into an intensive care unit. The number of COVID patients in London's hospitals has doubled in just 2 weeks. They're more stretched now than at the peak last April. Intensive care is expanding across University College Hospital, a children's area now for desperately sick adults. Every day, more wards are being transformed into ICU, ready for the next influx.
We'd be running so thin on staff that you just physically couldn't look after critically ill patients.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It would be ideal if we had one more time.
Greece is forcibly bringing in private doctors to help tackle the coronavirus pandemic outbreak, something that has brought its national health system to its knees. This measure will include 206 doctors under the age of 60 who will be requisitioned for at least a month in order to take some of the workload of their colleagues in Greece's most populous region.
Every day is worse than the one before. We predict that the coming days will be a lot worse, meaning we've got a long way to go. This morning in Sotiria we had 0 ICU beds available, and bear in mind that we are talking about the hospital with the most ICU beds in Greece.
It's very hard to conceive when you drive around in sunny Florida, things look normal, there's a few people wearing masks. But it's only when you step into the ICU environment and you realize how many people are dying from this disease and are in critical condition fighting for their lives when this becomes real, and it's so important for me to show that to you. The patient in this room has been on such high pressures for mechanical ventilation that she's developed air leaking out of her lungs into her chest wall, just as a result of the high pressures that we've had to give her on the ventilator in order to get the amount of oxygen she needs to survive. On Monday, I started my day at 6:30 in the morning. At 10:30, we were on this floor when the cardiac arrest code blue call came overhead. We all then had to run from this floor up to the 7th floor, which is our ICU alternative geography. CPR, chest compressions, was underway when we got there. We had to stand outside the room, get our personal protective equipment on while watching the CPR in place. As a provider, it's extremely difficult watching a patient who needs your help, but you have to take your time and get the personal protective on. That's a challenge mentally and emotionally to stand by and to force yourself to protect yourself before going into the room. We went into the room. We resuscitated the patient. His heart was not beating for about 5 minutes before we were able to get him back. We put him on a mechanical ventilator, and the day was filled with many more admissions and many more code blues. The first chance that I had to phone his family, who was called before his deterioration to say that he was going on life support, was at about 6:45 that evening. The degree of devastation this disease is bringing to our community cannot be explained in words. It's so hard for us as healthcare providers to witness the suffering of our patients and their families from this deadly virus.
I see the lack of equipment now. There's no equipment. The doctors are running up and down. Well, he makes one of the doctors there to speak with me, and he says, "We don't have equipment."
Where are the ventilators? FEMA says we're sending 400 ventilators. Really? What am I going to do with 400 ventilators when I need 30,000? You pick the 26,000 people who are going to die because you only sent 400 ventilators.
In the last 1 week, 16 countries have suspended the shot. AstraZeneca is what we call Covishield in India. In Europe, some people are said to have developed blood clots after taking this vaccine. Then the suspensions began. Denmark was the first to do it. It was followed by Norway and Iceland, Ireland, the Netherlands, Romania, Bulgaria, and Thailand. All these countries have placed a temporary suspension on the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Then we have countries like Austria, Estonia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Latvia, and Italy. These have suspended a specific batch of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Spain has delayed using this vaccine to inoculate people between 55 and 65 years of age. And just before we began the show, we got a flash from Berlin. Germany has now suspended the use of this shot. 16 countries have now suspended the AstraZeneca shot. Here's a question. Is the vaccine unsafe, or are these concerns overblown? First, let's tell you about the AstraZeneca shot, better known as the AstraZeneca Oxford shot, the same one that is being produced and used in India too. Last week, officials in multiple countries said that they had received reports of life-threatening blood clots. In a few cases, it proved to be fatal, like in Denmark, where one person died. So we have multiple countries worried about the prospect of dangerous side effects. By Wednesday last week, 5 million people in Europe had got the AstraZeneca shot. Out of these, 30 people experienced what is called thromboembolic events. In simpler words, blood clots. When blood clots in the vessel and blocks the flow. So far, India has reported 234 adverse events after immunization. 71 people have died after getting a shot. Any concerns about safety now will affect the demand and hamper the fight against the pandemic.
You'd be forgiven for asking, what is going on with the AstraZeneca vaccine in Europe? In January, there were bitter words about delays in its supply. There was an insistence that the EU would act as one on vaccines. And President Macron questioned how effective it is for older people, while the European regulator cleared it for use. Then in February, it became clear many AstraZeneca doses in the EU were yet to be used. And now in March, some EU countries, including France and Germany, have acted on their own and suspended its use without waiting for the European regulator. Last week, Norway, Iceland, Denmark, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia suspended the use of AstraZeneca's vaccine. A small number of people out of several million had experienced blood clots. Also last week, Italy suspended the use of one batch of AstraZeneca because a soldier had a cardiac arrest. Now, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Ireland and the Netherlands have fully suspended this vaccine's use. Now, these countries are pointing to Norway, where 4 people, 3 of whom are under 50, are being treated in hospital. The medical director of the Norwegian Medicines Agency says they have very unusual symptoms: bleeding, blood clots, and a low count of blood platelets. They are quite sick. We take this very seriously. Here's Ireland's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, who says, it may be nothing, we may be overreacting, and I sincerely hope that in a week's time we're accused of being overcautious. And these are pictures from Belgium's largest vaccination centre in February, far from busy. The Guardian reported that by the end of last month, 4 out of 5 AstraZeneca jabs delivered to the EU had not been used.
Johnson & Johnson has delayed the rollout of its COVID vaccine in Europe after regulators in the United States called for a pause because of safety concerns. 6 people who'd had the vaccine in the US have developed rare and severe blood clots. It's so far been given to almost 7 million Americans. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, reports.
An abundance of caution was cited by US health officials as the reason why they paused the use of the single-shot Johnson & Johnson COVID jab. The vaccine, which in Europe is branded as Janssen, was approved in the US in late February. Since then, there have been 6 incidents of very rare clots in the brain out of 6.8 million doses, so less than 1 case per million people immunised. All were women under 50, 1 of them died, and 1 is critically ill.
I think this is an unusual occurrence of a serious adverse event that you want to make sure before you go forward, you investigate it thoroughly. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're pausing so that they can look at it more carefully.
Similar, very rare clots have occurred with the Oxford AstraZeneca jab, and scientists are investigating whether this type of vaccine technology could be implicated. The biggest concern is globally. The plan was to immunise 1 billion people worldwide with the vaccine this year. If that's disrupted, it will slow efforts to finally bring the pandemic under control.
I see